Hello, good afternoon. Do you hear me loud and clear? All right. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 11, are the reporters for today. Okay, before we start, let's pray first. Binibining Paino will lead the prayer. Thank you.
Do you hear me? Naririnig po ba ako?
Yes, Binibini.
Sige. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
All right, thank you so much, Binibining Paino. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. So today we are going to tackle, or we're going to discuss about the chapter 11, which is all about the sustainable development. But before we proceed on our discussion, we prepared a simple game. So Binibining Mejia will lead this game.
Okay, next slide. Yan, ayan po yung mga reporters for today. Binibining Mejia, Binibining Paino, Binibining Barizo, Ginoong Babiera, at Ginoong Avenido. Next slide. Learning outcomes at the end of the chapter, the class should be able to, number one, differentiate stability from sustainability, and number two, articulate models of global sustainable developments. Next slide. So, ito na. Let's play a game. Unjumbled words, direction, rearrange each word into its correct order. Next slide. So, ayan. Sino unang gusto sumagot sa number one?
Ako po,
Sige, go.
sustainability po.
Yun nga ba? Miss Crizaldo Panex. Yun, tama. Sustainability. Number two. Sinong gusto sumagot?
Ako po,
Sige, go.
security.
Tama ba, Miss Crizaldo? Tama. Security. Number three. Sinong gusto sumagot? Wala. Char.
Ako po,
Sige, go.
ano po, agriculture po.
Agriculture nga ba? Tama, agriculture. Next slide. Number 4.
Ako po,
Sige po.
policy.
Policy nga ba? Yes, tama, policy. Last one. Sino pong gusto sumagot? Wala?
Ako po,
Sige, go.
biodiversity.
Biodiversity nga ba? Okay, tama. Binabalik ko na po kay Ginoong Babiera.
Ayan, thank you so much, Binibining Mejia sa palaro para sa araw nito. Ayan, once again, good afternoon, mabuhay. So today we are going to discuss about chapter 11, apropos of sustainable development. Next slide, please. Ayan, so before we proceed on our discussion, so I just have some queries. So what is sustainable? And when we say development, what is development? So when we say sustainable, it means sustainability means that meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So why is it important, no? So sustainability is very important because it improves the quality of our lives. It protects our ecosystem and preserves natural resources for future generations. And in the corporate world, sustainability is associated with an organization's holistic approach. So taking into account everything from manufacturing to logistics and to customer service. And when we say development, it's simply about improvement. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, wait. Okay. So before we proceed on this table, as you can see, this table 11.1. Okay. Ayun, naririnig na po ba ako? Hello?
Naririnig po.
And sorry, no, sir, there's some technical issues. Okay, so let's proceed to this table. Okay, anyways, before we proceed on this table at 11.1, which is all about the global population increase. So let's tackle first about toward a sustainable society and world. Okay, so the Earth's population has reached record levels because birth rates remain high in poor nations, and death rates have fallen just about everywhere. So reducing fertility will remain a pressing issue throughout this century. Even with some recent decline in population increase, the nightmare of Thomas Malthus is still a real possibility, as the stable 11.1 shows. Further, population growth remains greatest in the poorest countries of the world. Those without the means to support their present populations, much less their future ones. So supporting 77 million additional people in our planet each year, almost 74 million of whom are in poor societies, will require global commitment to provide not only food but housing, schools, and employment. So that is according to COLERT year 2015. So the well-being of the entire world may ultimately depend on resolving the economic and social problems of poor, overly populated countries and bridging the widening gap between have and have not societies. So I hope you're familiar with that terms. And urbanization too is continuing, especially in poor countries. People have always sought out cities in the hope of finding a better life. But the sheer numbers of people who now live in the emerging global super cities, including Mexico, Sao Paulo in Brazil, the Kinshasa DR of Congo, the Mumbai in India, and Manila here in our country, the Philippines. So have created urban problems on a massive scale. Throughout the entire world, humanity is facing as a serious environmental challenge. Part of this problem is population increase, which is greatest in poor societies. Excuse me. But part of the problem is also high levels of consumption, which mark rich nations such as those in Europe and North America by increasing the planet's environmental. So now let's proceed to this table as you can see in the slides, the table 11.1, which is all about the global population increase. So this table simply implies the birth rate, the death rate, and the net increase. So there are four columns. In the first column, you can see the first, second column, the birth, and the third column, the death, and for the fourth column, the net increase. So per year, there are 130,860,569 number of births, and there are 56 million rather 56,579,396 number of deaths. And for the net increase, there are a total number of 74,281,173. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you so much. So these are the, I'm sorry. So the answer in principle is to form an ecologically sustainable culture, a way of life that meets the needs of the present generation without threatening the environmental legacy of future generations. So these are the sustainable depends on three strategies. So this is according to Mashones, year 2002 and 2010. So first, the world needs to bring population growth under control. So meaning the current population of more than 7 million is already straining the natural environment. Clearly, the higher world population climbs, the more difficult environmental problems will become. So even if the recent slowing of population growth continues, the world will have 8 billion people by the year 2050. So few analysts think that the Earth can support this many peoples. Most argue that we must hold the line at about 7 billion, and some argue that we must decrease population in the coming decades. So this is according to Ismail, year 2009. And the second one is the conservation of finite resources. So this is the second strategy, which is all about conservation of finite resources. So this means meeting our needs with a responsible eye toward the future by utilizing resources efficiently, seeking alternative sources of energy, and in some cases, learning to live with less. And last but not the least is all about the reducing waste. So third strategy is about reducing waste. So whenever possible, simply utilizing less is the best way to do this. But recycling programs too are part of the answer. In the end, making all these strategies work depends on a more basic change in the way we think about ourselves and our world. Our egocentric outlook sets our own interest as standards for how to live. A sustainable environment demands an ecocentric outlook that helps that helps us to see that the present is tied to the future and that everyone must work together. Most nations in the southern half of the world are underdeveloped, unable to meet the basic needs of their people. At the same time, most countries in the northern half of the world are overdeveloped, using more resources than the earth can sustain over time. Changes needed to create a sustainable ecosystem will not come easily, but the price of not responding to the growing environmental deficit will certainly be greater. So once again, everyone must work together. And unity is very important. As if there is unity, everybody in this world would be unanimous one. And now let's proceed to the next reporter, and she will tackle about the food sustainability. Thank you.
Next slide. Yan. Magandang hapon sa lahat. Ako naman si Leslie Mejia ang mag-uulat sa bahaging ito. Food sustainability. Ano nga ba ang food sustainability? Naririnig naman ako, no?
Yes po.
Okay po. Ano nga ba ang food sustainability? Ito ay ang pagpapanatili ng mga pagkain kung paano ito gawin o iproseso, paano ito mapaparami, paano ito maibabahagi sa ibang tao, at kung paano ito nakukonsumo. Lingid sa ating kaalaman na ang pagpapanatili ng mga pagkain ay nakapaloob sa epekto ng resources usage, environmental impact, agricultural practices, at health. Kasama na rin dito ang social and economic impact. Okay. Ayon sa United Nations, in less than 25 years, in exactly 2050, hindi na magiging sapat ang pagkain upang mapakain ang buong mundo. Bakit kaya? Dahil sa dami ng mga pagkain na ating nakukonsumo, ngunit hindi naman lahat nakakain at itinatapon na lamang ito kapag nabulok na o ayaw na nating kainin, kaya nagkakaroon ng food waste. Ngayon, paano nga ba ito masusolusyonan? Next slide. Yan. Factors of food sustainability. Number 1, mapanatili natin ang farming practices na sa ating itatanim ay iwasan ang paggamit ng mga artificial fertilizer nang sa ganoon ay maging organic ang lahat ng pagkain na ating makakain. Next slide. Ayan. Para mapanatili ang mga pagkain at mag-save rin tayo ng enerhiya katulad ng tubig. Isa sa mga pangunahing kailangan para sa ating mga pagkain ay ang tubig o ang pagpapatubig. Hindi naman tutubo ang isang prutas o gulay nang hindi binibigyan ng tubig o hindi nadidiligan. Upang makalis tayo sa paggamit ng enerhiya para sa ating mga pagkain, simulan na natin magtanim sa sarili nating bakuran. Sa ganoon ay makalis sa mga production ang paggamit ng tubig at isa pa para makalis din sila at kayo sa paggamit ng transportation. Nakatulong na kayo sa kalikasan, nakasave pa kayo ng energy. Next slide. Isang factor din sa food sustainability ay ang malayang pag-aalaga sa mga hayop. Dahil hindi porket hayop ay dapat ikulong na lang dahil sila naman ay ibebenta rin sa huli. Pero mas maganda pa rin kung may pagpapahalaga at pag-aalaga pa rin sa mga alagang hayop upang maging malusog ang kanilang mga alaga. Kung malupit ang isang tagapangalaga, panigurado magkakaroon ng takot at hindi magiging malusog ang hayop na iyon. Next slide. Pang-apat ay ang safe at healthy na pagkain ang dapat natin kainin o bilhin. Hindi naman tayo kumakain ng may mga pesticide na pagkain, hindi ba? Mas mainam pa rin kung ang ating bibiling pagkain ay malinis at siguradong safe sa ating katawan. Sabi nga ng iba, health is wealth, lalo na ngayong may pandemya. Next slide. At ang panghuli ay ang pagsuporta sa mga communities natin. Bigyan sila ng mga pangunahing kailangan nila. Dapat safe din ang mga nagpo-produce ng ating pagkain dahil kung kulang sila sa mga kagamitan, hindi sila safe sa kanilang ginagawa, panigurado na walang magpo-produce ng mga pagkain na ating binibili at kinakain. Yun lamang po at maraming salamat. Next reporter.
Ayan, magandang hapon sa lahat. Naririnig po ba ako? Hello
Opo,
po.
naririnig po.
At all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, which meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. Food and Agriculture Organization, United Nations, 2017. So, kapag sapat ang physical, social, economic access, doon daw nagkakaroon ng tawag na food security, kung saan nami-meet o na-fulfill ang pangangailangan ng tao in terms of needs at food preferences. So ano nga ba yung mga example ng food security? Ito yung makikita natin sa school, which is yung feeding program na inululunsad ng eskwelahan sa mga batang lubos na nangangailangan ito. Mga volunteers na nagbibigay tulong din sa mga nasa kalsada at sa mga nasalanta. Napakain o binibigyan ng masusustansyang pagkain para sa kanila at sa iba pang programang nagbibigay ng pagkain sa mga taong nangangailangan nito without requiring any type of commitment in return. So bakit nga ba may mga taong walang kakayahan na makakain sa 3 beses sa isang araw? O di kaya mga tao na hindi nakakakain ng mga masusustansya. So yun, marami kasing factors bakit hindi natin namimit ng isang tao yung kailangan niyang kainin sa isang araw. Una na rito, yung kahirapan, walang trabaho, population growth, climate change, increased foods, at marami pang iba. So, next slide po. So, food security comprises several different components as follows. So, una ay food access. Dito naman sa food access, nabibigyan ng tulong ang mga nangangailangan ng pagkain nang walang delay o agaran nila itong natutugunan. So, sa distribution of food, nabibigyan ng bawat isa o naaabutan sila ng tulong. Ayan, yung mga nagta-travel pa para mag-repack at mag-organize para sa program na kanilang gagawin. Tapos doon nila i-distribute yung pagkain. Next, stability of the food supply. Ito naman yung pagpapanatili ng kalidad ng isang pagkain. Food stability can be defined as the availability of food over time. So, last one is the use of food. So, ang pagkain ay nagbibigay sa atin ng sustansya, energy, growth, and all the function of our body, such as breathing, digesting food, and keep warm material. So, next slide. Food insecure. Food insecurity, defined by the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, is a household level economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate food. So, ano naman yung cause ng food insecurity? So, Pag sinabi kasi nating food insecure, yung food insecure, kabaliktaran siya ng food security. Yung food insecurity is a state of being without reliable access to sufficient quantity of food affordable. Limited naman siya at uncertain access lang sa mga kain ng tao. So kabaliktaran siya ng food security. So ano naman yung cause? Balik tayo sa cause ng food insecurity. Ito naman yung poverty, unemployed, low income, lack of affordable housing, lack of access to healthcare. So ito yung mga taong need talaga ng suporta na makakain ng 3 beses sa isang araw ng masusustansyang pagkain at sapat sa kanila syempre. Makikita naman natin yung physically kung sino yung mga taong food insecure. So, hindi lang sa payat na katawan, kundi sa labis din na pagkataba o yung tinatawag nating obese. Isa din yun sa nagdudulot ng sakit sa kanilang mga kinakain. So, yun, maraming factor ng food insecure na nagiging result ng kanilang pag-iiba ng kanilang pangangatawan, ayun, dahil sa nagugutuman sila, wala silang pagkain. Tapos, nagiging malnourished yung mga bata or yung isang tao dahil sa hindi sapat na kinakain nila. So, sinasabi din ng USDA as an individual level of psychological condition that may result from food insecurity. So, ang United Nations kasi ay bihira mag-announce ng status pagkain. So, next slide po pala. So, ayan. So, 20% kasi ng household ay nakakaranas lang ng food shortage at talamak na malnutrition. Ayun, 30% yung talagang talamak sa mga malnutrition. So, sa 10,000 na tao ay maraming namamatay higit sa 2 araw. Kada araw, iyon. Sorry. So, dito naman tayo sa who is food insecure. So, based sa nai-report ng USAID, ito ay may 14.5% ng Amerikano or American ay nakakaranas ng food insecure during 2010. So sa 14.5% na yon ay 5.4 ang classify as low food security. Ganun pa man ay ang USDA ay nag-report na 20% ay wala ding katiyakan sa pagkain noong 2010. So based sa report nito, ayan, mapapansin natin na marami, 2010 pa lamang, marami na ang nakakaranas nito kahit sa ibang bansa pa. So, what more sa Pilipinas? So, napakaraming nangangailangan. So, ayun po yung difference ng food security and food insecure at saka kung sino yung mga food insecure. Thank you po and next reporter.
Ayan, once again, good afternoon. I'm Engelbert Z. Babiera, and my part is all about the factors behind lack of food and food insecurity. Okay, wag mo nang next slide. Before we proceed to these factors, siguro marahil ang unang pumapasok muna sa isip natin kapag napag-uusapan yung ganitong usapin or yung ganitong issue ay yung doon muna sa bansa natin. Wag muna tayong lumayo or wag muna tayong magtungo doon sa pangmundo. So bakit nga ba nagiging problema sa ating bansa yung tinatawag na food insecurity? So why food insecurity is a problem here in our country, here in the Philippines? So ayan. So according to yung tinatawag nating food security, okay, according to Food and Agriculture Organization or the FAO, when we say food security, it is a situation that exists where all people have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy lifestyle at all times. So, meaning it exists in 4 dimensions. First, the food availability, the economic and physical access to food, and the food utilization and stability over time. So again, the question is, what factors lead to food insecurity here in our country, the Philippines. So, here are some causes in each of the dimensions. So, first, the food availability. So, the economy of the Philippines is heavily dependent on agriculture. Most of what constitutes food security in the country depends on the agricultural sector. So therefore, challenges faced by Filipino farmers and fishermen often have a detrimental effect on food security in the country. And the prevalence of natural calamities in is one of the factors that contribute to food insecurity in the Philippines. Because as we all know, the Philippines location in the middle of the Pacific makes the country susceptible to typhoons and droughts. So some with devastating effects. And the next factors is all about the food access and stability. So the biggest challenge to accessing food in the Philippines is the lack of income due to unemployment. Alam naman natin na sa bansa natin, isa ito sa issue yung unemployment. So this problem is especially prevalent in the southern island group of Mindanao, where 9 of the 16 poorest provinces lie. So in Muslim Mindanao, which most recently served as a battleground between ISIS affiliated Maute Group and the Philippines military. So there are 50% of the population lives below the country's poverty line. So making just 60 cents per day. Those who reported to be food insecure in this area cited lack of income, so that's 37%, lack of a regular job, 18%, and drought and natural calamities, 12%, as main reasons for going hungry. And last, of course, the food utilization. So, proper food utilization ensures that consumed food must have a positive nutritional impact on people. And people must be informed of storage and hygiene practices, individual health and water and sanitation and feeding and also sharing practices. Again, the challenge posed for this aspect of food security is income. So in a country with the highest food prices in the region, only those with a sufficient income will be able to afford nutritious food. So those with lower incomes will have to settle for something less costly or sometimes with nothing at all. Now, next slide, please. Okay, so these are the causes of food insecurity. Ito, kumbaga ito ay malawak na. So first, we have what we call food distribution. Okay, so although it is commonly thought that the world population will outstrip food production capacity, current production of food exceeds global population requirements. So historically, famines and widespread hunger have been caused by problems of food distribution, political or logistical, rather than by insufficient food production. So although the global population is expected to rise in the next several decades, global hunger is predicted to decline. So several well-known famines in history, such as the Irish potato famine and several Indian famines in the late 19th century, were caused not by lack of food, but by lack of uh, will, will political will to distribute the food to the starving poor. So during those famines, Ireland and parts of India were actually exporting food to various uh, other English colonies. So Malthusian theories were used to support political choices to avoid helping the starving. So food distribution, rather than total food production, continues to be a global problem in solving food insecurity rather. Next slide. Okay, we have political agricultural practices. So various political agricultural practices contribute to food insecurity. So these include substituting commodity crops for food crops. For example, we have growing corns instead of vegetables, and heavy exportation of food crops at the expense of food security of the exporting country. So in addition, the recent demand for biofuels, currently produced primarily for corn and soy, has further decreased the amount of variable land being utilized for food production. And next slide, please. Okay, the environmental factors. So natural disasters such as drought have been frequently implicated in food insecurity. However, natural disaster related food insecurity and famines are exacerbate, exacerbated by food distribution problems and lack of food surpluses due to exportation or other political factors. It is predicted that climate change may negatively affect food supply and food access due to loss of farmland, uh, fluctuate, fluctuating food prices, increase in food-borne illnesses, and other food utilization issues. So other environmental factors such as soil degradation, uh, including including salinization due to heavy irrigation, desertification, erosion, and soil pollution related to industrial agricultural practices may negatively affect global food security as well. Next slide. Okay, it's all about, last but not the least, the other economic and political reasons. So the global rise in food prices in the last several years has been precipitated by a number of factors, so including the natural disasters such as drought, increased demand for biofuels, the US dollar's decline, and an increase in the middle and upper class in countries like China. This has created increased demand for meat and dairy, and thus increased demand for grain. Increases in food costs generally mean increases in the food insecurity. Other factors contributing to food insecurity include loss of farmland or pasture land due to development, conflict and war, water access issues, and of course, the disease. So now what is the results of food insecurity? Okay, here is Janet Bariso to tackle this. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's proceed on results of food insecurity. Pa next slide po. Result of food insecurity. On an individual level, food insecurity, especially over time, causes physical, social, and psychological problems in both children and adults. In the United States, food insecurity has been documented lead to paradoxically obesity, especially in women. So next slide po. In infants and toddlers, food insecurity is correlated with higher hospitalization and generally poor health. So food insecurity directly linked to poorer physical and mental health, as well as to an increased risk of chronic disease such as diabetes and hypertension. So it's limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, or limited or uncertain ability to acquire acceptable foods in socially acceptable ways. So ito yung mga limitadong pagkain o hindi tiyak na mayroong sapat na nutrisyon. Sa next slide po. So next is sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture consists of environment-friendly methods of farming that allow the production of crops or livestock without without damage to human or natural system. So based on my research, sustainable agriculture basically is to meet society's food and textile need in the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs, no matter how elegant the system or how accomplished the farmer is. No agriculture is sustainable if it's not also profitable to provide a healthy family income, and a good quality of life. Sustainable practices lend themselves to smaller and family scale farms. So these farms in turn tend to find their best niches in local markets within local food systems. So often selling directly to consumer as alternatives to industrial agriculture. Agriculture evolved, so master markets and the farmers who serve them, creating and serving new markets remains one of the key challenges for sustainable agriculture. So the following are the topics in sustainable agriculture. First is agritourism. It may include an opportunity to help with farming tasks during the visit. It is lifestyle holiday that is normally spent on farms. The next is agroforestry, the intentional integration of woody vegetation, like for example, trees or scrubs with crops or livestock. And next is biofuels. It is any fuel that derived from biomass. It helps to meet transportation fuel needs. The two most common types of biofuel in use today are ethanol and biodiesel, both of which represent the first generation of biofuel technology. Next is conservation tillage. It builds up crop on the soil surface to minimize the impact of water and wind erosion. Next is controlled environment agriculture. Aims to provide protection from the outdoor elements and maintain optimal growing condition through the development of the crop. Next is cooperatives. It is an autonomous association of persons united and voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through jointly owned enterprise. So next is cover crops. It manages soil erosion, soil fertility, soil quality, water weeds, pests and disease, biodiversity, and wildlife in agrosystem or an ecological system managed and shaped by humans. So next is dairy waste management. It disposes of all the things you don't want on the farm. Composting is sustainable waste management practice that converge a large volume of accumulated organic waste into usable product. Next is direct marketing. It is the sales of agricultural goods and products from the farm straight to the consumer without intervening distributors or retailers. It can contribute towards sustainable agriculture and food system by increasing farmer profitability, promoting the local economy, and providing consumers with higher quality and healthier products. Next is energy efficiency and conservation. So it is a effort made to reduce the consumption of energy by using less of an energy service. So next is food and agricultural employment. Individuals involved in food production and service for which are often find at risk of diet-related chronic disease, unsafe living and working condition, and inadequate access to health care. Next is food labeling certification. There are many different food labels that contain information about how food was grown or processed. However, some labels can be misleading. Next is food waste management. A key sustainability challenge for the hospitality and food service. It's an unsustainable system of food production and consumption. Next is genetically modified crops. It is plant that has a novel combination of genetic material obtained through the use of modern biotechnology. Next is global sustainable sourcing of commodities. It focuses on improving the environmental, social, and economic impacts of the ingredients. These help ensure availability of the ingredients they need to make their products and align with their core values. So next is institutional sustainable food procurement. It is the sourcing of sustainable products for residential and retail dining operation, concession, and vending and catering. So next is biologically integrated farming systems. It is to use biological and cultural farming practices to reduce chemical inputs such as pesticide and fertilizer and reduce the degradation of natural resources caused by the inputs. Next is integrated pest management. It combines the use of biological, cultural, and chemical practices to control insect pests um, in agricultural production. So next is nutrition and food system education. It has a critical role in access to sufficient quality and quantity of foods for households and communities. Next is organic farming. It is a method that at least 95% of the ingredients of agricultural origin are organic. Organic content less than 70% in products may not refer to organic production method. Next is precision agriculture. Numerous economic and environmental benefits may be realized by strategically applying management principle, including number one is enhance product quality, and number two is increase agricultural profitability and sustainability. Number three is protecting the environment. And the last is optimize use of agricultural pesticide, fertilizer, seeds, water, energy, and other crop. So next is soil nutrients management. It includes developing nutrients budget that consists of knowing the amounts of nutrients present in the soil, determining the amount of nutrients needed by the crop. So next is post-harvest management practices. The goal of it is to know everything you can about your commodity and aim to pick quality, strength, sustainability in your processes, and to don't take losses for granted. So prepare for the worst and be creative and collaborative. Next is technological innovation in agriculture. The industry as a whole is facing hug challenges from rising cost of supplies, a shortage of labor, and changes in consumer preferences for transparency and sustainability. Innovation is more important in modern agriculture than ever before. So next is urban agriculture. It is practice of cultivating, processing, and distributing food in urban areas. Next is value-based supply chain. It preserves the social, environmental, and community values that are incorporated into production. So next is water use efficiency. So as the ratio of biomass produce the rate of transportation, it refers to the ratio of water use in plant metabolism to water loss by the plant through transportation. Next is water quality management. Involves the authorization of dangerous substances for which monitoring of surface water is essential. So it is issued several regulation and directive related to water and management and pollution control, including the prescription of monitoring and activities. So the last one is zero emission freight transport. So it supports the carbonization of the freight sector. It compares the evolution of heavy duty diesel and technologies in time frame. So it synthesizes data from the research literature and demonstration and low volume commercial tracks regarding their potential to deliver freight with zero emission. Um, it also analyzed the emerging technologies by their cost of owning- ownership and life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. So, po next slide po. Thank you po. So, let's proceed on improving agricultural biodiversity. Improving agricultural biodiversity through sustainable agricultural practices may also food insecurity. Increasing with field biodiversity can be achieved through planting crop mixtures and multiple crop varieties. The establishment of diverse planting at field margins should also be considered. So planting strip of beneficial flowers, incorporating and establishing a row of trees or scrub, and also separating fields and leaving areas of land uncultivated are methods of increasing diversity on non-crop land. To increase diversity of native pollinators and establish blocks and allows access to areas of soil such as soil piles for nesting and branches of trees and scrubs, such as those in hedgerows, and will also provide nesting site of pollinators. So next reporter po.
Okay, next po. Okay, policy changes. Next, dito nga sa policy changes, sabi nga 'di ba na ang changes o pagbabago ng isang sitwasyon, mga bagay at iba pa na katulad na lamang ng policy o mga panuntunan ay inevitable o hindi maiiwasan, hindi mapipigilan. Dahil alam naman natin na ang mundo ay patuloy ang pag-ikot at patuloy ang sirkulasyon. Um, um, in example of the policy changes in the US or United States rather, nagkaroon ng changes sa mga policy nila to champions the sustainable locally produced food. First, excuse me, increased incentives for local farmers and for markets where fresh, healthful food is available. Second is increased community food security. Third is increasing acceptable of food stamp benefits at local food outlets. And fourth is improve access to healthful food and increase consumption. Sinabi rin ng sa policy changes o policy change ng US is yung community gardening, home gardening, and urban farming they are also approaches to enhance community food security and boost fruit and vegetable consumption by using sustainably farmed local food. More people may benefit from urban agriculture and home gardening rather by purchasing seeds and edible plants, which will help decrease food insecurity. So next po, okay, I understood that prioritizing food security on a global scale is not the only movement addressing malnutrition and hunger. In fact, there is a movement that encompasses a slew of other critical but ignored facets. The demand for food justice and sovereignty. Okay, food justice and sovereignty. First is the food justice. Food justice, the idea that food is basic human right. Food and the risk of benefits of the way it is grown, produced, should be distributed. Food justice is a comprehensive and structural perspective of the eating system in which nutritious food is seen as a human right and structural impediments to that right are addressed. And next po is yung food sovereignty. Next po, yes, this is the right of people to define their own food in an agriculture, to protect and regulate domestic agricultural production and trade in order to achieve sustainable development. This is defined by the agricultural lay activist group via Campisana or Union of Farmers in the United States. And meron silang objective, no? Meron silang dalawang objective. Ito yung to determine the extent to which they want to be self-reliant, and next is to restrict the dumping of products in the markets para hindi naman tambak lang ng tambak ng mga products tapos hindi naman nakukonsume, hindi naman nakukuha ng maayos ng mga consumer. When it comes to the production and distribution of foodstuffs, no, the food justice movement as well as food sovereignty movements are interested, so long as the focus is solely on food security without addressing the production of food in poorer and less food secure countries. They will import cheap subsidized food to the detriment to detriment of their local farmers, as a result of which long-term and sustainable food security will be negatively affected. So, so these groups believe that local food production and consumption are the best way of avoiding the vicious cycle of hunger, no, and dependency on foreign imports, and last is a lack of long-term food security. So next po, so sa punta naman tayo sa 7 pillars of food sovereignty para mas ano natin, no. Yung first six diyan were developed at the International Forum for Food Sovereignty, and yung pangpito naman dinagdag na lamang ng mga members of the indigenous circle during the people's food policy process. Una dito is yung focus is on food for people. Dito yung places the needs of individuals for food at the forefront of policy decisions, and insists that food is more than a commodity to be consumed. And the second one is build knowledge and skill. Build knowledge and skill, it is based on a traditional knowledge, no? Hindi parang kumbaga bibigyan nila ng pagpapahalaga yung traditional, kasi parang napakalayo kung pupunta lang tayo dun sa bago, and then hindi naman kayang i-approach ng mga farmers natin. Build knowledge and skills, this information is supported by research, which is then passed on the future generations. And technology that undermines or contaminates local food system is strongly opposed. Third is work with nature. Dito ini-ensure that ecosystem make the most of their contribution, increases one's ability to bounce back. Fourth is the value food providers, contributes to the development of sustainable livelihoods and respect the efforts of all food service professionals. Fifth, like localized food system. Enables food vendors and customer to be closer to each other para mabilis yung proseso, and objects to dumping and improper food assistance, and disavows relying on distant and unaccountable businesses for sustenance. Six, puts control locally. Local food sources will have more power as a result. The necessity to occupy and share territory rather is acknowledged, and natural resource privatization is strongly opposed by this group of individuals. And the seven is food is a gift from God. Seven is food is sacred. Food is a gift from God, and it should not be thrown out being used, and argues against the commercialization of food as commodity. For my summarization of my topic, policy changes and food sovereignty. Okay, food systems have unavoidably been altered by policy, with taste mostly set by those in position of power, influence, and income. Centuries old political intentions and action have lasting effect on disadvantaged culture and their homelands. Communities don't select terrible labor conditions, poor salaries, and restricted food and production options associated with a globalized food system. Politics, policies, legal decisions, and institutional racism have impacted access, no, to viable economic opportunity, culture, and traditional food supplies. Despite the massive disparities in our present food system, community led food sovereignty groups are growing to promote food sovereignty. Food sovereignty principles must be maintained at every stage in the food supply chain to promote more justice and diversity for everyone. According to Wendell Berry, for a farmer and environmentalist once stated that eating is an agricultural act, arguing against industrialization of food system that disrupts human to environment connection by producing products rather than food, observing that both eater and eaten are thus in exile from biological reality, no? By according naman kay Vandana Shiva, an Indian scholar and activist, elaborated on this notion, demonstrating the interconnectedness of food in almost every part of our lives. Eating is an ecological act. Consumption is a moral act. Consuming food is a political act. Consumption is an agricultural activity. To some extent, food pervades every part of human existence, for better or ill. Yun lamang po. Thank you.
Naririnig pa po ba ako?
Opo.
Alright, thank you so much, Ginoong Avenido, sa isang makabuluhang talakayan. Okay, so before we end this discussion, considering all the facts, ano nga ba talaga yung tinatawag nating, kumbaga yung pinakalayunin o mga layunin ng tinatawag nating sustainable development? So, according to some articles that I have read, there are three primary objectives of sustainable development. First ay yung tinatawag nating economic growth. So building a strong competitive economy by ensuring that sufficient land of the right type is available in the right places and at the right time to support growth and innovation. And also identifying then coordinating development requirements. The second one is the environmental protection. Sustainable development is for environmental protection. So contributing to protecting and enhancing our natural and developed environment while helping to improve biodiversity, utilize natural resources wisely, minimizing waste and pollution, and adapting to and helping to decrease climate change, including a global shift to low carbon economy. And the last, but not the least, is for social inclusion. So supporting strong, vibrant, and healthy communities by providing the supply of housing required to meet the needs of present and future generations, and by creating a high quality of development with accessible local services that reflect the community's needs and support its health, social, and cultural well-being. So bakit nga ba mahalaga yung tinatawag nating social development? Simply because social development, so sustainable development. So simply because sustainable development practices help countries grow in ways that adapt to the challenges posed by climate change, which will which will in turn help to protect important natural resources for ours and of course for the future generations. So I think that would be all. That would be all for today. Thank you so much and good afternoon.